excited to learn about GIS mapping, and our topic today is GIS Mapping 101, the why and how of capturing data. We're super excited to learn about data. We all have learned that data is super important, so we can hear about their journey and everything they've done and what they've learned. It's been a great journey so far. So we're going to hear from Amber Turnus, who is the Hawaii Digital Equity Coordinator with the Hawaiʻi Broadband and Digital Equity Office. We're also going to hear from Issa Moffett, GIS consultant with the Community Mapping LLC, and we're going to hear from Brad Kaleo Bennett, the Executive Director of Aloha Collaborative. Turn the time over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Good morning, everyone. I just want to take a quick moment before she runs out of the room. I haven't been able to pin down Jackie Kaine yet to give her a thank you from all of us for all of your work. Thank you, Jackie. She's been running around. I haven't been able to actually get her in the room to thank her in front of anyone yet. I know people are still filtering in from the last session. So please do expect people to be joining us in the next kind of 5-6 minutes as they make their way from the last session and before lunch. I'm sure a couple people decided to go and have a little early lunch. I'm going to get started. My name's Amber Turnus, and I'm here with the Hawaiʻi Broadband and Digital Equity Office, and here to talk about one of the projects that we've been working on over the last year from our side of the office, which is a digital equity project tracking app, where we have looked at collecting data from digital equity activities that have taken place across the state for the last 3 years, actually. So we went back in time to collect data using a wide range of community organizations and partners and reaching out to them in person, going through our old calendars and our old schedules and trying to document some of the activities that has taken place in the community with a range of activities from digital literacy classes, device distribution, and then community engagement activities where we do talk and give educational opportunities to folks. So we've been collecting that data and mapping it. The shared reality that all of us here have on this panel today is that we all work within a similar program in the GIS space it's part of Esri, and it is a tool that we use to visualize data that is called a story map. And we all are using a tool here called the Survey 123, which is a really user-friendly data collection survey tool. You can use it on your mobile phone, and the way that it's been created, and I actually have one of our project creators here in the audience today, so I do want to give a quick shout out to Phil Balin from FEMA, who's joining us here, who was part of the inception of this project from quite a while ago. So we created a collaborative team to come up with this, and the big lift that we had to make when we started the journey was to figure out the types of questions we wanted to ask. Once you create a Survey 123, which is actually a very simple process in itself, the challenge is once you create it and start collecting data, you do need to keep the questions the same. So this requires looking into the future, trying to determine what kind of information you might want in the future, and also to think what are the parameters and the needs you have for the survey you're creating in terms of what do you need and must have in there. So we decided some of the key components that we needed to have were around geographic location, so where in the state of Hawaii did an activity take place, the types of community members that were involved from a demographic perspective. That's one of our federal requirements to document, so which types of community groups are we working with? And then the type of funding source that actually paid for that activity, whether that was a county-funded initiative, a state-funded initiative, or something that came downstream from federal funds. We can use all of this information to plan future activities, so we can use it to motivate locations that we might want to go to, or to motivate the types of activities that we would like to see. So we can actually break this data down. What you guys are seeing here is the data, the visualization, representation of this mapping. So the red dots represent clusters of activities. So the larger the dot is, the more activities were taking place in that location. So it's been really fun for us to see in a snapshot what we've been doing as a larger community. So almost all of the activities that are mapped on here actually took place through a wide range of community organizations and partners. So a huge part of our work was to be able to have that community connection and that research, those resources, to know who to ask about what they were doing in the community, because we really wanted to show a really wide range of activities, from activities taking place in libraries, health activities in the health sector, all the way across into very, very local nonprofit literacy classes and engagement activities. So the tracking app was first conceptualized at the end of last year, and we finally figured out all of our questions and got our beta testing done and launched the survey in May. We did a ton of work getting that historical information uploaded into the data set, so that when we launched the survey, we had hundreds of data sets to look at. One of the really challenging things when you're doing this is when you start, you have a blank map. And it's not very exciting to look at a map that has no data on it, even if you know you're going to get it. So we were very lucky in this approach that we had historical data to input into here from the start of COVID. So that's what we decided to use as the launch for this, was the start of COVID. So when we launched the app, the tracking features here, we actually had hundreds of data points to look at, so we could really start using it in an active way and engaging with this tool. Here is the QR code that you can use yourself now if you want. You can save this on your phone on a page and take a look at it. This is the survey that we created. It's designed to be very user-friendly. So the goal that that our team had when we created this was we wanted people to fill it out in less than 2 minutes, so that the barrier to entry, or the ability for people to engage with it, was so low that everybody would just automatically put it into their tool set and into their skills. And that has proven to be quite true. I'm going to talk a little bit later about some of the human challenges that we had in terms of getting the data. It's been very interesting talking to all the different communities across the state and trying to help really local nonprofits see themselves as a key part of data collection and data management and data visualization. It's not a normal thing that people in our communities are used to doing when they're working in this space. And to see their data up on the big screen, I think, can even be a little intimidating. So there's quite a bit of work that we do in terms of talking to community and just educating them about the very basic purposes and value of them participating in this for all of our work. This is the result of all of the data. You can see the same map is there in the center with the red clustered dots. This is what we call the dashboard. This is actually a little bit historical already. The data is always getting uploaded into it. So I'll pull up on one of the next Broadband Hōʻike meetings, the most current version. But what's exciting about this is that it shows not only the data that we collect or that's been collected by our local Hawaii-based organizations, but it also links to national databases. So we have the ACP subscribers, so that's people that are enrolled in the Affordable Connectivity Program. We also have the ALICE households listed here. One of the things that we're very excited as we move into this next legislative session with the map fully active and up to date is our ability to layer this information with congressional districts and other types of layers of information that we can use to communicate to different partners. So a great example of that will be when we look at our grant program that we're trying to get funded for next session. We can go to legislators and let them know how many activities have happened in their district purely from volunteers or purely from these basic community groups, and then we can start to communicate to them what can happen in the future with more funding. So if this is what we can do with volunteers and just community participation, what can we do with real funding and real money? This is especially going to be true for device distribution and the digital literacy classes that do take quite a bit of resources to get going. And here are some more contact QR codes. One of the outcomes of our research we've done statewide over the last 9 months for the digital equity plan. One of the, I would say almost quite surprising outcomes was that almost everyone in the state of Hawaii has access to a cell phone and uses that as a primary tool to connect. So we've really pivoted to using the QR codes as a way for people to really quickly get that information for themselves. So feel free to take a look. We have the ACP program on here. It's a big part of our office's work is trying to make sure that everyone who is income qualified for that discount program receives it. And you can also take a look at the digital equity plan to learn more about the big picture work that our office is doing. So I'm going to turn this over to our partners here at Aloha. I'm very excited to share the stage. I shared at the end of the last session that our project tracking survey was actually inspired or brought out of the work that this team had already been doing. Aloha Collaborative is the first organization that I'm aware of that was using this type of survey tool, the Survey 123, to collect information from community directly. We work in very different subject areas, so our work is in around tracking activities, and they're working on the more on another side of things, but it's the same tool and platform, and to me that's what's very exciting about this work is that we can educate community and everybody who works in public engagement or community engagement around the value of collecting data in all of our work, and that the subject area of what we're working on isn't even as important as collecting that data from the people whose lives we impact so that we can use it to create more high quality programs and bring those to the communities that need them the most. So I'm going to pass this over to Issa and Kaleo from Aloha Collaborative.
Hi, thanks. So I'm Brad Kaleo, and I'm the Executive Director for Aloha Collaborative, and this is...
Here, Issa.
She's more than that, though. She's our GIS genius.
Yeah.
So this all came from the dashboard you're seeing up here is from the first speed test data collection that we did starting in 2019. We did a pilot project. We had we got private funding to do it. Kamehameha Schools, Kaua'i, Internet Society all gave us some money in order for us to go out and collect data in neighborhoods, in rural and underserved neighborhoods, to kind of check what the actual speeds were as far as the broadband connectivity out there. So we sent volunteers out, and I said it to the last group, I'll say it to you guys. We did this in 2019, which is in the middle of the pandemic, so I tell everybody always, we picked the worst time in human history to go out and do a door-to-door survey. And my other favorite quote for that whole thing is, Mike Tyson once said, everybody has a plan till you get punched in the mouth. And so we have to figure it out, we have to adapt. We decided that we moved to an online presence. We did send people in their neighborhoods, but only people who lived in those neighborhoods. So we hired people who lived in those areas, and they weren't going to expose some insular neighborhoods to outsiders. We did a lot of online advertising, a lot of radio advertising, TV advertising, and newspaper as well. And we were able to come up with about 1,500 unique surveys, which, considering the time that we had, was a pretty good idea. So we released our results. They were about what we expected as far as what the speed test looked like and all that in these areas, right? Because a lot of these areas were underserved just because of location and where, infrastructure. We did that. The report is on our website, omocollaborative.org. Anybody can download that, so you can go ahead and take a look at our results for that. But all of this work is based on that, and this is, again, the dashboard that we used. It was on the State GIS website. We partnered with Arthur Buto from the State GIS section to do this. We're transferring this over to our new website, hawaiispeedtest.org, which should be up and running in the next few months. Give us 3 or 4 months just to make sure. But we have our partnerships in place with Esri. We have our partnerships in place with Ookla to embed the speed test on our website. So when this is up and running, anybody can log on type in your address, take a speed test. Your results will pop up. There's some questions we'd like you guys to answer around affordability of internet, around device availability, around why you use the internet, telehealth, etc. And we're going to collect all this data, and all of the data will be visually available to everybody who logs onto the website. So, ISRA is working on that part as far as what, how everything is going to be visualized through the Esri platform, and she can kind of speak more to the data collection piece for that. But look for this in the next few months, and once it's up, we'll do a big push, a media push once it's up and running. But we look forward to that happening. ISRA is looking for. She's looking for beta testers for that, so she'll kind of speak to that a little bit, but I'll turn it over to her.
Yeah, can give me your business card after if you want to be involved with that. And then just a note too, I think with that grassroots approach and then hiring people from the community, especially during a pandemic, like 1,500 responses is pretty awesome. So with this revamp, this 2.0 of collecting speed tests, we're hoping to kind of break it down and make it a little bit easier for people to take. So we partnered with UCLA, so there's an option to do a survey portion or just a speed test. So there's value in both of those. One, it's just a quick one and done, and two, the survey actually gets into like how people are using the internet, what tier are they subscribed to, what are some limitations that are occurring. And then it also provides us just one-on-one access to follow up and ask more questions. Really try to get like a cluster of people who are taking the speed tests, and then supporting them through that and connecting them with their ISPs as well. And so on the left here we see speed test by UCLA. This is a sample set that they provided us, and the red dots just show like where people are not served or underserved. And then on the right here, we see the FCC broadband map. The darker the blue, the more service that's available. If you've checked out this website, this map, you can scroll in further and start to see a different story depending on the scale that you're at. So we're hoping to take these two data sets along with other data sets to really start to hammer out a narrative. So one is those community responses. So that anecdotal stories from you and everyone else who's in the community, hopefully, doubling, tripling, quadrupling the number of survey responses to get just such a robust data set. And Sean and I were talking earlier about how this is such a new space for mapping and broadband within digital equity and understanding what the digital divide looks like. And just going through just many years of understanding what is the landscape of broadband availability. And as infrastructure starts to be deployed to, how is that narrative changing? And so we would like to start here and just kind of navigate and see where this goes. So as you kind of listen to this presentation, I would love for you guys to think about how does this play a role in your work, and how can you use this information? And is there something more from this information that you think would be beneficial for your work? And those are the things Cleo and I would like to hear and really start to weave into this work. So just kind of picking up from that data set, talked about the community responses, the speed tests, the FCC broadband map, ACP, so who subscribes to the Affordable Connectivity Program, different census demographic data, and community anchor institutions. So community anchor institutions really start to be important in rural areas where internet might not be available at home, and so people tend to go to libraries or schools. And so understanding which of those community anchor institutions actually have service available, and where they're accessing that. And I used to work for Hawaii County and Hawaii Islands. One of the programs that my office was involved with was placing routers out in the community during the pandemic. So different buses and students could take out tablets, computers, and get free internet, along with their parents or just people in the community. So what's the correct place for that, and where can we start to launch those types of programs? which, you know, is where you all come into, like taking this data and really using it for your programs. So understanding where speed tests fit in. So looking at that analysis, not from just like where is internet available and where it is not, but where are those hotspots as well. There's so much fun, different analysis that I can do, that we can do. So I'm excited to dive into that and share with you all as we start to get those survey responses. And then also, as I mentioned, the temporal analysis. So how is this changing over time in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? And then along with that, what are the geographical limitations? You know, there's volcanoes and water, and how does that play a role into accessing communities or even deploying infrastructure? So hopefully over time, you know, we'll have a really good idea on what that starts to look like. So some of the outcomes that we hope to achieve are, one, just advocating and supporting people who have tried to speak up but haven't really had a platform to do so, and that's what Aloha is doing, is providing that platform for people who have been historically underserved or underrepresented in that information. And then two, just identifying households and businesses that lack internet connection and why. So the small businesses at home who would like a connection to fiber, or maybe not satellite, or vice versa. Just establishing something that they can rely on, so that reliable internet piece of that. And then discovering where community digital services are most needed, so like training on how to access telehealth and get connected with your doctor. That comes a little bit more challenging when there's not internet, or you live so far from a hospital or health services. Do community anchor institutions play a role in really providing a safe space and a supportive learning space for people to achieve that? And then the last two, which kind of goes in that temporal analysis, is you know, how are the funds serving those areas, and over time, is that infrastructure actually serving those areas, and do we need to go back to those locations and just take a relook at it, or are they doing the job, and kind of sharing that narrative too. And I'd like to point you to this report, Best Practices for Speed Tests, and I really like this report. It's by the Reed Consulting Group, because they take UCLA speed tests and they deliver it in a way that debunks, I think, a lot of perceptions about the validity of speed tests. So perceptions such as like bad tests are because of poor Wi-Fi. And the report found that they can eliminate speed tests with weak Wi-Fi. And so I think that's the beauty of UCLA too, is you have so much data at your fingertips and you're able to make that distinction between the two, which then that data becomes even more valid and helpful for kind of navigating this path forward. So check out this report. It was sent to the NTIA in relation to the FCC broadband map. So they go into speed tests for their first part, and the second part goes more into infrastructure. So if you're interested in the infrastructure components, take a look at that report. Is there something you want to say on this?
Yeah, speed tests are important, right? I mean, that is how they determine whether or not you or your area is served or unserved, bottom line. Right now, there's people who have many things to say about speed tests. Some people question the validity of speed tests, but as a whole, they're the only thing we have right now to determine whether or not an area is considered served or unserved according to NTIA standards, right, or FCC standards. So I think it's important to look at speed tests not just from the standpoint of doing a beat challenge, right? So there's a beat challenge process. If your speeds aren't what you think they should be, you have to follow certain criteria, do these speed tests, and then you can, you know, maybe do a challenge, right? And trying to figure out whether or not it's an issue with the service, if it's an issue, you know, if it's an issue with your personal equipment, then you can contact your ISP, have those conversations as well. But until we start having those conversations and measuring with speed tests, it's hard to tell what's going on, right? So for our work, speed tests are very important in giving us snapshots of what people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So when we talk to people in our, in our area of community engagement and really going out and talking story with people, and that's what we're going to do with you guys now. Okay, we built in time for this presentation. We want to have a conversation with you guys because that's what we do at Oahu Collaborative. We talk to people. We advocate for people who may not have the ability to advocate for themselves. So we want to make sure that, good. Oh, fast today. Perfect. You know what, they're cutting us off because they're going to eat lunch. So we got about 10 minutes for questions. I know Phil has a question. And Constancio promised me he would have a question. But anybody else? Question? Hey, John.
I'm just curious, one of the issues for mapping in my mind has been identifying sort of historic redlining where underinvestment has caused service to be lower quality or higher cost in lower income communities. So the first part of my question is, did you find that? And then the second part is, are you able to capture cost data? I mean, the price of the connections. Because all this mapping is about, I know speed tests maybe not, but in the other surveying, is there a way that you're able to capture affordability into is there a differential in the way cost against the red line?
Can I take the first part?
Well, yeah, I think the cost part. And then you can do the rest of it, right? Yeah. Sorry, we're just working it out here. So for the cost piece, in our initial survey, we did have a question around if you didn't have internet, why? Why not, right? So the question was specifically, was it a cost issue or an infrastructure issue or both, right? Yeah, so we didn't ask for specific costs, and I think this next round we are actually going to do specific costs, or well, not specific costs, but giving ranges, yeah, for our next go around. But for the initial one, we did find that cost was a kind of big factor for some people. You had to choose between buying internet or not, right? And a lot of them chose not to. They just had their cell phones, and that was enough for them. So, but the redlining, I'll let Issa handle.
Yeah, so I looked for redlining data in Hawaii, and it's a little bit more complicated here. So I pivoted to a social vulnerability index, which looks at numerous attributes, from like race to income to household to climate change, vulnerability to natural disasters. Different indexes that really contribute to how a community, how vulnerable they may be. So I'm happy to point you to that online map as well, which can also be found on the Hawaii County Research and Development websites. But if you have any recommendations for redlining, let me know.
Other questions? Comments? Concerns?
You mentioned how the data is digital in nature and can be shared with the groups. What's their process for communities being able to access the data? It seems like you've captured so much information and can be used for many different purposes. And I'm wondering who they would reach out to get access to that, and even have a conversation about, I've looked at some of these questions, how could I see it in a different way?
So that initially we shared the data through Arthur's State.js website, right? So you could click on each data point and you can see the answers that they gave to each question, plus the speed test data. For this next go around, we are going to be able to visualize that on our map at hawaiispeedtest.org for those who choose to answer the questions. As far as who can access that question, who can have those conversations, we'll talk to anybody about it, right? So our contact information is at the bottom of this slide. So you can email us if you have a community that would like to have this conversation with us, because we're looking for communities that need help advocating for themselves, right? Or just have questions about this process, because it's not a naturally intuitive process, right? Dealing with speed tests and dealing with all of this stuff. So, having just a little bit of knowledge to point them in a direction, I think is important, and really listening to what the needs are and helping you determine, is it an issue with service? Is it an issue with your equipment at home, right? Because a lot of people just say, I get, crappy service from so-and-so. But it's not the case, right? It's your equipment. Something wrong with your equipment, right? So, so we can't just blame the service providers because you don't have a good service. You got to kind of do your due diligence at home and figure out, have you done everything at home to optimize this connection so that if there is a problem, it's not your equipment, it's something else, right? So anybody can email us to have these conversations. We will speak to anybody, any groups, and we're currently reaching out to a lot of our DHL communities just to kind of start advocating for them around community broadband networks. And we were a little disappointed. I asked a question earlier to Jaron about community broadband networks. It was initially in the NTIA proposal that was approved, and they've since removed it. So I was a little disappointed to hear that because that service was providing we were providing mesh network services for free, through this funding to rural communities. So now we got to go find another source of funding to do that. So I think.
Can you tell us about Aloha, why you chose that name?
Oh, so Aloha, for those who speak Hawaiʻi, right? Aloha, it means to carry a burden or to share a burden. So I was having a long time ago when I started having an idea for this nonprofit, I was talking to Manu Meyer, and we were talking about Oamu Kuleana and how the shared burden of the shared burden of Kuleana, and you look at Kuleana not just as a burden but as an honor. It's a privilege to have Kuleana, for people to trust you to do this work, right? So we wanted to make sure that when we created a nonprofit, that we were sending a message that we're not here to, we're not coming with that missionary mentality where we're trying to tell you that we know better than you. We're here to share with you. We're here to help you carry the burden, help distribute the load among a whole bunch of people to make it easier to carry. So that's how we came up with that. Thanks, Sean. And I think that's it for our time, right? We good? 2 more minutes. We have one more question, or somebody can set up and say their alma mater. That'd be good too.
Sorry, I had a question. We've been having trouble getting addresses because people are like, no, we're not going to give your my address to your place. I was wondering how you went about it.
We didn't collect addresses. And that was a promise we made, not just to ourselves, but to the people we were working with, that we wouldn't have any personally identifiable information. So even when it was visualized on the GIS map, there was a filter that stopped at a certain level. So you couldn't tell the home address. Yeah. So Dan Smith always argues with me about he wants the addresses. But I just, for us, I just feel uncomfortable collecting those, having that, because if you collect it, now you have a responsibility to protect it, and we didn't feel comfortable with that. So yeah, so to answer your question, we didn't collect addresses.
And for the second round, addresses are required for challenges, but like Kalea has mentioned, it's not the primary goal. But we are hoping to make, build relationships with people who might be willing to give addresses so we can submit those challenges or cluster challenges. So we are only seeking to collect them when that trust is built. So we're just kind of looking for that.
Yeah, so if they want to help with challenges, then they got to give us their address. But hopefully by then they have a reason to do it.
Sorry, one more question.
Okay.
Can you speak to the challenge process? I know that's discussed tomorrow with UH, but your Oamu's position with the challenge of how you're going to integrate this new site into that process and utilize it.
Perfect. So the idea for us is, again, we are willing to help individuals or communities. So you can do an individual challenge or an area challenge, right? So like a bunch of neighbors can get together and say that our service is such and such, and we want to do a challenge. But part of that is educating them about the intricacies of the challenge, right? I mean, it's not rocket science. It can be done, but there are very specific measurements that need to be taken, right? You need to do a speed test on 3 separate days within the last 60 days between the hours of 7 to 11 p.m. Right? So it's walking them through that and then understanding what level of service there was initially some misunderstanding about NTIA, saying that you had, people were saying that you had to have the highest level of service, which is not true. You can have any level of service, and if you're not getting that level, then there's a possibility for a challenge. But yeah, I know Nate's going to send me for lunch, but
One
please.
last thing.
Okay.
My spatial brain just thinks like that whole analysis part, like where are the underserved areas, and really communicating the need to start doing those challenges in that specific area. So just starting there too. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and we want to give a big round of applause to our participants. Thank you, Amber.